I'll never forget going to gym class as an elementary school student, and our gym teacher was there to greet us every morning, and he was standing on his head, literally standing on his head. And he would be wearing a tank top with his arms revealed. And it was the first time that I saw somebody with a number tattooed on their arm. Mr. Chiffron, he taught us a lot about sports and physical fitness. When I think about that 30 years ago, I realized Mr. Chiffron taught us a lot more than about physical education. As we heard from these heart-wrenching and beautifully inspiring stories from our Sinai Temple community right here, children of survivors, and others who are in the congregation, like Sharon Gitman, who are also children of survivors. We mark this Holocaust Remembrance Shabbat not only with their stories, but also with words of our tradition. In this week's Parsha, Parshat Bo, we read, V'higadat halavincha bayom hahu lemor. The commandment is to tell your story on that day. Tell your story. And when you read the commentaries of what that really means, it's quite clear that it doesn't mean only sitting at a Passover Seder once a year, telling your story. So ask yourself for a moment, do you know your story? Do you know your parents' story so that you can share it with your friends and family? And who have you shared your story with? I often ask B'nai Mitzvah families, to the parents, tell me about your bar mitzvah, tell me about your bat mitzvah. If they come from Iran, often over the last few years specifically, the dads will tell me, well, I either didn't have a bar mitzvah or I was fleeing with my family, and so we had a very quick bracha over the Torah, and that was it. For a lot of the mothers, I hear, well, we didn't celebrate bat mitzvahs then, and so when my daughter stands on this beam at Sinai Temple, it's the first time in their family that a daughter recites the brachot from the Torah for a bat mitzvah. And I look at them and I tell them, tell your child that right now. Tell them your story so that they can share it too. Chizkuni in the 13th century France writes that it is our job to place the questions into the child who does not know how to ask. We know the fourth child of the Seder, but do we actually think that we should put the question in their mouth? And 600 years later in the 19th century, the Malbim, he writes that yes, we must remember every day, and we do that through our prayer book. But he says telling a story is very different than only remembering a story. In fact, just last week I spoke with a Holocaust survivor child. She's a member of the synagogue. She's an Oscar Award-winning Holocaust documentarian. And we asked her in front of our teens, why did you make this movie? And she said, because her mother, who died many years ago, was a Holocaust survivor and never wanted to, never could tell her story. And so only after she passed did she go back and find that story, and she has committed her entire life now to making sure that her mother's story and other stories are told. Because telling our stories is how legacies are left. Today, according to the most recent statistics, there are only 200,000 or so survivors left in this world. One of them being Abe's mother, 100 years old, Sharon Gitman's mother, some of us in this congregation with grandparents and great-grandparents. When I was a child, I remember on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day in the Jewish calendar, watching survivors walk down the aisle of my synagogue and light the memorial candle. And now on Yom HaShoah, when we find people to light those candles, we are now often asking the children of the survivors to light those candles. But what about the great-grandchildren and the great-great-grandchildren who will only know their ancestors by name? If they don't know that story, then they will not light that candle. So how important it is to tell your story? The Or HaChaim in the 18th century says, even if you do not have a child, you should sit in a room by yourself on Seder night and tell your story to make sure that it goes out into the world. When I look back at my own childhood, I realized that I was surrounded by Holocaust survivors in Syracuse, New York, a small city of only 8,000 Jews or so. But many of those survivors came to Ellis Island in New York and went to Syracuse, of all places. When I was thinking about what to say, the names flooded my mind. Leo Newman, Dr. Jacob Jakubowski, Herbert and Vera Ornsdorf, Kurt and Mila Winter, from all these countries of Eastern Europe who survived the Holocaust. And I realized I was and am and will continue to be a recipient of their resilience and their strength. And I learned their stories. Every Yom Kippur, my father, who was the rabbi at the synagogue, during Yom Kippur afternoon, he would make little booklets like this, and every year he would tell a different story. It was during the martyrology service. And my first collection of books that I took from my father's office when I became a rabbi was not the Talmud, but in fact it was these little booklets that I have. And this past week I looked at which stories I had, and which one did I find? Mr. Chiffron, my gym teacher. It's called We Are Still Here. Mr. Chiffron was married to Mrs. Simona Chiffron, and she was actually my first Hebrew teacher. She taught me Aleph and Bet. She taught me how to sing Dayenu. She taught me the words of the Hatikva to love the land and the people of Israel. And as I reread the story this week, I am so grateful for them, but also to my own father, who decided to take the time to hear their stories, to write these stories down so that I could stand here today to tell you the story of the Chiffrons. Mr. Chiffron was born in Poland outside the large city of Lodz. And in 1940, just like we heard from the stories today, a knock at the door from the Nazis to tell them they had 2 hours to take whatever they had for their belongings. They were a family of 9, but one by one dwindled to a family of 2. His brother Barish was taken to a work camp, never seen again. Moshe and Shimshon, his other brothers, taken to a different school, never to be seen again. They were taken on a train to an unknown place, and so they decided, thankfully out of luck, to jump off the train, and they never saw their father again. But when they arrived at Auschwitz, they did see their mother and their sisters, only to see them walk to their impending death. And after surviving hell, 81 years ago this week, January 27th, 1945, they were liberated from Auschwitz. And it was at that moment that Mr. Chiffron, Daniel, and his brother Nathan were asked, well, where do you want to go now? And just like we heard from many of the children of the survivors today, they said, I want to go to Palestine. And so he went. And because he did, he was a founding member of the Haganah, fighting for the independence of a Jewish state of Israel. He went there because Barish, his older brother, talked to him about what it was like to be a Zionist in pre-Eastern European World War II Europe. And it was there, thank God for me, that he met his 17-year-old Beshert, his beloved bride Simona, who was a survivor who her entire family survived from Romania. And so they moved to a place called Syracuse, New York, where they taught generations of Jews the Hebrew language. Mrs. Chiffron, she gifted me this Siddur, this prayer book that I use to this day. In 2009, the year I became a rabbi, Mrs. Chiffron said this: we are grateful people. We look ahead, but we have to remember we cannot change what happened. What the Nazis wanted to do was get rid of us. They did not do that. But we have to tell the world that we remember. Mrs. Chiffron passed away in 2016 with over 1,000 students to her legacy of bringing Judaism into this world. The social scientist Leonard Fine writes, there is no last, there is not ever. But that is only true if we tell their stories. And we can all participate in this mitzvah. You may not be aware, but every year our Sinai Temple Religious School has a Holocaust survivor brunch. It's next Sunday, February 1st. Come and hear these stories. This year we are inviting children of the survivors, like you heard today, to tell their parents' stories so that the next generation of Jews all around the world will understand what it means not to just remember, but to tell. Since October 7th, we have ended many of our sermons and many of our services with the rounding rendition of Am Yisrael Chai. The people of Israel live. And we're going to do that right now, but in a way that you have never heard it before. Because Am Yisrael Chai, that you are about to hear, was written in a displaced person's camp in Yiddish. People who still only a couple of years before dreamed of a place called Israel. The words in English are as follows. Open door and open portal. It's enough. Let's not be mournful. With flag unfurled and freedom's torch held high. From the burrow, from the bunkers, going onwards what we long for, while proclaiming, Am Yisrael Chai. The survivors sang these words as they dreamed of a Jewish state. And today, on International Holocaust Remembrance Shabbat, we are grateful for their lives. We are grateful for their stories. We are grateful for in Israel, where we can say these words and it is not a dream, but a reality, where we commit ourselves to learn and to tell their stories, so there will never be a last again. To sing Am Yisrael Chai, we are truly honored that Cantor Ari Brown, who actually served here several years ago, as part of Barat Hall and as part of this beautiful Sinai Temple musical tradition, a Yiddish expert in her own right, to sing with us, Am Yisrael Chai.
Effen Tier und effen teuer, schon genug die Treue. Mit vornen Flatter spannt hat sind die frei. Von die Bunkers, von die Lächer, steigen Wellen wir als Hecher. Weil wir sagen, Am Yisrael Chai. Wie der ausgehen wird das Leben und der mit a Ticken geben, wählen wir das aus, was ist vorbei. Legt a Ziegel zu a Ziegel, über uns gespreit die Fliegel, hat der Geurol Am Yisrael Chai. Es scheint die Sonne schon wieder, durch Tränen scheint das Glück. Zum Leben, schwester Brüder, wir kennen sich zurück. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. 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 Wie viel Schrecks ist nur voranen, heldisch seien wir ausgestanden. Ghettos, Lagers voll mit Pein Geschrei. Jiddisch Volk geblieben, Semir, uns wird wieder unser Semmer weit verklingen, Am Yisrael Chai. Jiddisch loschen, Mameloschen, nicht verstummt und nicht verloschen, ausgeschält scheun von Pein und Weh. Von die Aschen, von die Stäuben, wie auf vorne Reis gehäuben, haben wir es Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael, Am
Cantor Ari and Brown, Yisrael Chai.